1:30, and I think we do have a quorum. Clerk's been keeping track, and we may have others joining as we get started with the meeting, but let's go ahead and call to order the October 7th, 2021 meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority and the Sacramento Abandoned Vehicle Service Authority. And thank all board members are with us, as well as any members of the audience, and certainly our staff for being here today. So with that, I'm going to turn to Darrell and ask her to briefly read it into the record, the announcement about how to participate and any other pertinent information, and then we'll call the roll and do the Pledge of Allegiance and get right into our today's meeting. So, Darrell, I'll turn to you.
Announcements. In compliance with the directives of the County, State, and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, this meeting is live streamed and closed to in-person public participation. Temporary procedures are subject to change pursuant to guidelines related to social distancing and minimizing person-to-person contact. To make a verbal comment at today's meeting, dial 916-875-2500 and follow the prompts to be placed in queue for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter. When the chair opens public comment for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter, callers will be transferred from the queue into the meeting to make a verbal comment. Written comments are always accepted. Send your email comment to boardclerk@saccounty.net. Your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record. The meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T U-verse cable systems. This meeting is closed captioned and live streamed at metro14live.saccounty.net. Today's meeting will replay Sunday, October 9th at 4 p.m. on Channel 14. And that concludes my announcements.
Okay, thanks,
and
Darrell.
On to the roll call.
Roll, please.
Desmond?
Here.
Frost? Guetta?
Here.
Harris?
Here.
Kozlowski? Kennedy? Miller?
Here.
Natoli?
Here.
Sandhu? Chenier? Cerna?
Here.
Singh Allen?
Here.
Speece?
Here.
Terry? Valenzuela?
Here.
And Vang.
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Great. Okay, I'm going to ask, in chambers, Mr. Jones. Tim, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. And with that, on our agenda, do we have any comments from the public regarding matters that are not on the agenda?
We do not have any public comment, written or verbal, at this time for item number 1.
Okay. If somebody does arrive, we can certainly accommodate that at the end of the meeting if necessary. So with that, then we'll go right to our consent calendar. We have 4 items on the consent calendar, and if there are any questions of Mr. Jones or Ms. Dahl, they're here in the chambers, but if not, no questions, motion would be in order.
I'm sorry, did you want to do executive director report for item number 2?
Yeah, I do, but where's number 2? I guess I got a page missing out of my agenda here. I go from 1 to 3, so yeah, I do want to do that. So,
Okay.
So excuse me for that, and not to overlook our executive director. So we're going to we'll insert the page. Thank you to the clerk for calling to my attention, and we'll turn to Ms. Drago for executive director's report. Serena.
Thank you, Chair. Well, happy October, everyone. So let's kick things off on a high note regarding federal infrastructure. The federal transportation funding did expire on September 30th, but there was a stopgap put in place through the end of October to continue to fund transportation at a federal level and stave off any federal transportation employee furloughs. The larger infrastructure package has yet to go to the Senate floor for a vote, but they are anticipating that happening by the end of the month. And now on to some local business. At the September 15th board meeting, as part of agenda item number 8, the vice chair asked council if there was a limit on administrative expenditures in the Measure A program. Council informed her that Measure A does not impose any specific dollar limitations for administrative expenses. However, council subsequently clarified in a message to the chair and vice chair that one of the capital allocation contracts between the STA and the Southeast Connector JPA, which was executed in August of 2015, did place limitations on expenditures for general administration expenditures for fiscal years 2015 through 18, with caps ranging from $100,000 to $200,000 annually. The contract states that future annual disbursements for general administration purposes are subject to approval by the board. Since 2017, STA staff and the connector have informally agreed to treat administrative expenditures for accounting purposes as capital expenses, for the simple reason that capital project construction cannot be implemented without administrative staff time and effort. The STA board, however, has not specifically reviewed connector annual disbursements for administrative purposes separate and apart from general budget approvals. This contract was originally a $25.6 million contract, and to date there are $3.3 million left, and it's set to expire in 2023. The JPA has also has a separate capital allocation and expenditure contract for $4 million that the board approved in April of 2021. This contract does not include any limitation on administrative expenditures, and the JPA is now charging all of its administrative expenses through this allocation contract. Staff is currently working with JPA and anticipates bringing an item before the board in November to discuss the implementation of the 2015 contract. The 2015 JPA contract is currently the only active contract within Measure A that explicitly states a limit on administrative expenditures. And finally, we are still actively searching for a new voting member for the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee. Please direct any candidates to the STA or ITALC websites for application information. And Chair, that serves as a conclusion.
Okay, thanks, Sabrina. Are there questions? Members, Maya, did you raise your hand?
Sorry, staff has asked questions.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Again, Darrell has to step away just for a second, so I'm not able to control the leaderboard here. And do we have some hands up, Madam Clerk?
I do not see any hand raises at this time from any of the members.
Okay. Anybody verbally want to weigh in? Any questions?
Oh, wait, I have one hand raised from member Kozlowski.
Okay. Mr.
I
Kozlowski.
just wanted to say good morning to everybody, and I have arrived.
Okay. So is it morning where you're at? Are you at somewhere besides Folsom?
Oh, I suppose it's afternoon.
Okay.
Wishful thinking.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, good to see you. All right. So please note, Member Kozlowski's available. Did anybody else join us after we took roll? Okay, I don't think so. All right, very good. Then with that, if there are no questions, thank you for the update, and now we'll move to the consent calendar. And would again turn your attention to that. If there's any questions, please come forward now. If we have any members of the public, but if there's not, then we'll have a motion would be in order for the consent calendar.
I'll move the consent calendar. This is Vice Chair Valenzuela.
Okay.
I'll second. Harris?
Okay, moved by Valenzuela, seconded by Harris to approve the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, any?
We do not have any written or verbal comments at this time for item number 3 or item number 2, just for the record, and I do not see any hand raises by the members.
So we're doing 3, 4, 5, and 6 all in one motion?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Very good. So we have a motion and a second, and nothing further than please call the roll.
Yeah. Desmond?
Aye.
Frost? Guerra?
Aye.
Harris?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Aye.
Kennedy? Miller?
Aye.
Natoli?
Aye.
Sandhu? Chenier? Cerna?
Aye.
Singh Allen?
Aye.
Spees?
Aye.
Terry? Valenzuela?
Yes.
And Vang.
Yes.
And your motion carries.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll now move into our separate items, and the first item is our Sctm FP, revenue projections and land use category update, and I think Mr. Jones, and he's going to be joined by a guest presenter today a little later on. He'll introduce to Mr. Gomes, I believe. So, Tim, turn to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Today before you is the Sacramento County-wide Transportation Mitigation Fee Program, the SCTMFP, which was approved by voters in 2004 as part of Measure A to generate revenue to mitigate the impacts of new development throughout the region. At the same time, voters approved an expenditure plan that identified how and where the anticipated funds were to be used. In my staff report, I provided some background information for those of you that are new to the STA board. Today's presentation will enhance the discussion section of that report by summarizing the results of the efforts of STA staff and the consultants' economic and planning systems, referred to as EPS, over the last several months. As mentioned in my staff report, there is a significant revenue shortfall. Because of that shortfall, the ability to fully implement the SCTMFP portion of the expenditure plan as originally envisioned has been negatively impacted. This impact will certainly limit the number of capital projects that will be completed and reduce funding for certain Measure A programs such as the Smart Growth Incentive Program and the Transportation Project Environmental Mitigation Program. Historically, revenue estimates have been developed internally by STA staff using a conservative year-over-year escalation rate. However, given the importance of this funding source to STA's capital program and the need to better understand the timing and amount of cash the program will generate, it became apparent that the authority needed help from a consulting firm with expertise in the area of regional development and the fees it generates. To identify a competent consultant, staff interviewed 3 firms that performed this type of work, and through that process determined that EPS was a standout. The firm was hired for a sum of $30,000 to perform revenue projections and to provide a comparison of STA's land use categories and fees with those of 5 similar self-help counties throughout the state. With us today is EPS's principal and project lead, Jamie Gomes, who will walk us through a slide deck that captures the results at a summary level. So at this time, I'd like to turn our attention to a slide presentation and Mr. Gomes, and then subsequent to that, if there are any questions by members of the board, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So Mr. Gomes, is he on Zoom? Well,
Yes, he is.
okay, so with that, Mr. Gomes, welcome, and we'll get the slideshow up and allow you to walk through your findings and your forecast.
Great. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. It looks like I have a slide deck up. So first, I just want to begin with a thank you for the opportunity to present to the board members today the results of the analysis. And in particular, I want to thank STA staff and Tim especially for his leadership on the project and in especially coordination with the member jurisdictions and staff in collecting some of the data that we use to put together the development forecasts. By way of brief introduction, EPS, we're an urban land economics consulting firm. We've been around for about 40 years now, offices in Sacramento, Oakland, Los Angeles, and Denver. I've been with EPS for over 20 years now. And our Sacramento office has been in the region for about 33 years. So with that, we have done work for the Transportation Authority in the past, and also either historically or currently have a lot of active work with many of the member jurisdictions within the Transportation Authority. So it was a pleasure to work on this project because it does involve a reacquaintance with a number of your staff members. So happy to have contributed to the project. Next slide, please. So EPS's work effort was really divided into 2 work efforts with a primary emphasis on the development projections and the revenue forecasts. But in addition, staff had asked EPS to look at other self-help counties with similar transportation mitigation fee programs and looking at how those programs were administered and implemented with a focus on the number of categories of land uses and how those fees were charged. So first, let me start with the development and revenue forecasts. The transportation mitigation fee is certainly, as Tim pointed out, a very important element of the overall funding strategy for transportation projects in the region. And unlike the sales tax revenues, it can primarily be used for capital improvements. It doesn't have the same segregation of funding into the various categories. So because of that, it certainly is a very important source. However, it varies by year because it's dependent upon building permits that are pulled and the fees that are charged by the local jurisdictions. So with that was the focus of our revenue projection analysis. Our land use forecast feeds the revenue analysis, which then would assist STA in its planning for transportation capital funding. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So our work effort began by surveying and collecting data from each of the member jurisdictions. So it's all of the jurisdictions within Sacramento County, including the unincorporated areas of the county. And the data we collected was primarily grouped into two categories: historical information, which would be historical building permits and STA transportation mitigation fee revenue collected. And then we asked the jurisdiction to provide data on the development pipeline and looking forward into the future and what development was anticipated. And in certain circumstances, we had jurisdictions that had either conducted on their own or had contracted to have population, employment, and housing projections done. And so where those were available, we had asked staff to provide those as well. The historical information we collected assisted us in understanding what the historical revenue projection and building permit activity had looked like by jurisdiction. And then from a development pipeline perspective, it gave us insight into what the jurisdictions anticipated. Who would be a better source than the jurisdiction staff to understand what development is in the pipeline, who's coming in and seeking building permits. So it's really on the ground, vital and current information. So when we take all the historical data and we took the data from development pipeline status, we synthesized that, and as I'll mention in the next slide, we combined it with other data to develop both short-term and long-term revenue forecasts. Next slide, please. So in addition to the data that I mentioned from the jurisdictions, which is in orange on the left, EPS also reached out and gathered data from several third-party data sources. And primarily the most relevant and useful sources were the Construction Industry Research Board, the North State BIA, Gregory Group, and CoStar. And that's primarily focused on, I'd say, the historical side of things, just reconciling what the jurisdictions had provided and giving us better comprehension of development activity, not just within the area subject to the fee, but within the greater Sacramento region. Because as you know, development absorption occurs regionally, not just within the area within which the fee is collected. In addition, we looked at SACOG and State Department of Finance projections. Both of those agencies conduct and provide very long-term projections of development and absorption. So we use that to calibrate our analysis to ensure not only what we projected fit within that overall development envelope, but wasn't either way too far in excess or much too pessimistic, if you will. Next slide, please. So first, the next two slides will summarize the results of our work. And this first one is looking at short-term revenue forecast. So for it, we looked at the next 3 fiscal years. And on the left side of the slide, this is a pie chart demonstrating the source of revenue by member jurisdiction. So as you can see, over the next few years, we anticipate about 2/3 of the revenue will come from new development within the cities of Sacramento, Elk Grove, and Folsom. And that probably isn't too surprising given the level of activity that we're seeing within those jurisdictions. And then within Sacramento County and Rancho Cordova, we're in the mid-teens from a revenue percentage basis, with the balance of the jurisdictions making up the remainder. Again, not too surprising, on the right-hand side, the overwhelming majority of revenue is derived from single-family residential development. There's been I'm sure many of you are well aware of the demand for single-family development that's been accelerated as a result of the COVID pandemic. So about 75% of the revenue forecast in the short term is assumed to come from single-family residential. And when you include our forecast of revenue from multifamily residential, those together comprise about 87% of the potential revenue over the next 3 years. If you can switch to the next slide, please. Let's stick on the right-hand side for a moment and just focus on the percentages. Over the longer term, there's the recognition that non-residential development will pick back up. There certainly has not been much office development within the region for the past 5 to 10 years. And until the COVID pandemic shakes out, that probably will likely still be the case. But this longer term projection is looking at a 20-year time horizon. So it does anticipate future office development and other non-residential development throughout the region. So over time, the residential portion of the forecast drops down to about 3/4 as opposed to almost 90% in the short term. And then on the left-hand side, there's just reflection of a gradual shift, a slight increase for the county of Sacramento and the city of Sacramento, with gradual tapering, if you will, in the cities of Folsom and Elk Grove, with Rancho Cordova and the other jurisdictions holding about steady. Next slide, please. So this slide reflects some of the major development areas that we focused on for the analysis. And when we assembled the data from the jurisdictions, we divided it into 3 categories of development. The first category was actively developing projects, and those are projects for which the infrastructure has been completed, building permits are actively being pulled. The next set was our planning in the planning stages, and those would be the projects for which a tentative map is approved, but for which no horizontal or backbone infrastructure development had yet occurred. So they're approved, they have entitlement, but there's been no horizontal development, so it's not as though a building permit could be pulled within the next 6 to 12 months. And then lastly, our third category of development is what we call conceptual. And those are really longer term development projects that are in the pipeline. An example of that type of project might be the Upper West Side specific plan or the Grand Park specific plan, where it's in the process of seeking entitlements, but certainly not very close yet to having obtained them. One important note about the projections is that we did not, the short-term forecast does not include some significant projects that may occur within the region over the next 2 to 3 or 4 years. Notably, the proposed UC Davis hospital expansion, the proposed Aggie Square project. We don't have those 2 included in our forecast because those are likely to be led by the University of California, and thus we don't anticipate they'll be subject to the transportation mitigation fee. And then in addition, the rail yards project, there's an entitled project within rail yards, the Major League Soccer Stadium. And given the uncertainty around the timing of that stadium, we did not elect to include that within the short-term forecast. Next slide, please. So the last element of our analysis was focusing again, as I mentioned, in comparing the land use categories for the transportation mitigation fee as it's collected by STA as compared to other similarly sized self-help counties that also have a fee. So for that, we looked at Alameda, Contra Costa, Fresno, Riverside County, Western Riverside County, and then Riverside County and Coachella Valley. And what we learned from that analysis is that the STA's mitigation fee does have almost twice as many land use categories as some of the similar jurisdictions. STA's fee has about 25 land use categories, whereas the comparable jurisdictions have approximately 5 to 10 land use categories. And then in addition, when we look at the application and the implementation and administration of the fee, what we noticed is that the other jurisdictions had a little more clarity around the applicability of the fee, when exclusions might apply, and in particular, the treatment around accessory dwelling units. So as indicated in the staff report, this last element is not an action item. It's not necessarily something that's up for decision today, but it was information that staff would maybe use in the future in conducting outreach to each of the jurisdictions, and it may be in consideration for your board for future amendments to the fee. So that concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to entertain any questions if there are any.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Appreciate your walking us through that and with your slides. I think it might be useful too for if we don't have a copy of that, if folks want either access to the PowerPoint and/or hard copy, unless was that made it available.
It was in the board packet?
It was in the board. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes.
Make sure. Okay, everybody has it. Okay, so let me turn to board members and questions, comments, thoughts.
I have a hand raised by Member Harris.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Jamie, thanks for the presentation. Regarding ADUs, state law exempts ADUs from impact fees generally, but are you saying there's a delineation with STA in terms of the number of square feet of an ADU in terms of STA levying an impact fee?
You are, Member Harris, you are correct that ADUs below 750 square feet are exempted from development impact fees.
Yeah.
750 feet and above, you can impose an impact fee on ADUs if a jurisdiction or a board elects to do so. And I didn't mean to infer that STA is doing that. What I meant to clarify is that the other implementation guides or the other fee schedules had more clarity about treatment of ADUs. So it's very clear whether they were excluded entirely, regardless of their size. And I didn't see the same level of clarity necessarily with the STA fee schedule.
Yeah, thank you for that. So amongst the other jurisdictions that you looked at, in the clarity they provided, did they specifically exempt all ADUs from impact fees? Or was it split amongst jurisdictions? Some going with the state law and levying a fee over 750 feet? Or how did that play out?
Yeah, I'd have to confirm. I know some exempted them entirely, but I don't remember if it was unanimity there.
Well, I would certainly be in favor of STA giving more clarity about that. In full disclosure, I'm building an ADU, and I did have to work to understand, which organizations were going to levy an impact fee and which weren't. And it actually took a fair amount of work in the permit process to understand which impact fees were going to be levied. I took the easy route and built it under 750 square foot, so I didn't have that issue. But I might have made a different decision about the size of the ADU if I had had more clarity. So I think it's a really good thing for STA to be very clear about where we would like to go with that. And my preference would be to just exempt ADUs to keep it simple. But we're trying to encourage ADUs to improve our housing stock, and I think that the benefits there outweigh the loss of fees to STA.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and good article in the paper, and you were up on the ladder putting some wiring in, but good comments about the importance of ADUs, and certainly thanks for your leadership and all your good work. And one of these days we'll get a chance to see the completed unit, I'm sure. So
I'll have you over, Don.
okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Jeff. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll make note of that there's some interest in talking about that. I want to just ask maybe a clarifying question. So in our ordinance, if you went to 751 square feet, you'd pay for the entirety of the square footage, or is it the starting point, you get a pass on 750 square feet, and then everything over and above up to whatever the limitations are, you pay on that? Or once you cross the threshold, you pay it for everything that would have been excluded had you stayed under the 750.
Our ordinance does not include that specificity. The only indication that we have is in our fee schedule, which is not in the ordinance, and our fee schedule does not speak to that specifically. So I think in part what we're proposing is that we add some language about ADUs in general, as it is right now, we have none.
Okay, so again, I think to Member Harris's point, to put it all out there for discussion, but it would seem to me that that becomes a discouragement in particular if you can build up to, but then once you go over, then you pay for the entirety where you would have been exempted. So there might be some other way to approach it beyond if there was concern about exempting entirely ADUs up to whatever the square footage was permitted in the jurisdiction. But okay, so we make note of that, and we'll bring that back for the discussion by this board as to how we want to approach it from the definition. Okay, other members of the board want to speak to any of the items that were?
I don't see any other hand raises by any of the members, and there are currently no verbal public comment at this time for item number 7.
Okay, so let me turn to Sabrina and to Tim then. So we've had the discussion in brief about ADUs, but there are other components here. And in the report itself, it talked about, I don't know if it's upside and downside, but certainly as to treatments and if you consolidate categories, how you might end up, at least in some cases, getting a reduced fee from some uses versus maybe getting more in some other cases, making it simpler. So what sort of time frame would you bring this back to us in?
Yeah, my intent is to start meeting with the jurisdictions over the next month, so I would hope that I could have something to you by December. If not, it'd be early in the year.
Okay.
And I think part of the challenge is that not only is there a simplification process, but what we're trying to do is better align the use fees that STA has with the local jurisdictions, so it makes it easier for those at the counter to apply the fees to the permits. That's been a challenging factor for many of the jurisdictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see this back in a month or 2 or maybe 3.
Yep.
I think that, and just notably, last thing I would just say is that no matter how you slice the bread here, though, the projections that were used when the measure came forward at $450+ million, even under the rosiest of characterizations, is still going to fall way short of that in the development fee category. Is that?
That's correct.
It's accurate.
Yeah.
Precious dollars. Okay.
Right.
All right. If there's nothing further, then no other comments or suggestions for any items people would want to have a focus on, we'll see this back likely December, right after the first of the year. So.
Yes, sir.
All right. And thank you, Jamie, for being on the call today, and appreciate your work working with our staff.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. Okay. There's nothing further with no public comments. As clerk noted, let's go to item number 8, Sacramento Abandoned Vehicle Service Authority, the Sunset 2022 status update and recommendations. And it's Jennifer's, I guess Sabrina, you're going to kick it off and then introduce Jennifer.
I'll turn this over to Jennifer Dahl, our Special Programs Manager.
Okay. Good afternoon, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and members. Staff can report the following SASVA updates. SASVA member commitment status. To date, the cities of Elk Grove, Folsom, and Sacramento and the County of Sacramento have formally approved to support moving forward with the tax measure. The City of Citrus Heights had previously denied supporting a tax measure, but with the updated estimated costs, may be amenable to supporting the tax measure effort. Staff has not been notified of any decision from the cities of Galt and Rancho Cordova. The SASVA STA tax measure polling. At the September board meeting, FM3 Research presented the results of their Sacramento County Transportation Tax Measure Survey, which included asking participants about renewing the SASVA program and associated registration fees. A slim majority, 51%, initially supported the abandoned vehicle tax measure, with 1/4 definitely no. After participants were offered some background information on the program, support increased to 66%, nearly the 2/3 threshold required. The 29% increase in voter support after receiving SASVA program information is a helpful takeaway, supporting the need and benefit of hiring a firm for public education and outreach. Task timeline. The next few months, staff and SASFA member agencies will need to accomplish several key tasks to ensure the proposed SASFA tax measure is included on the June 2022 ballot. And I attached that timeline to my staff report. SASFA Memorandum of Understanding. As previously reported, the authority does not have the funding to cover the associated ballot costs related to placing the proposed SASFA tax measure on the ballot. Therefore, without a Memorandum of Understanding, the authority cannot move forward. The Memorandum of Understanding will lay out authority and member responsibilities. In particular, the fair share amount of associated ballot costs for each member, with half of that amount being submitted to the authority up front. Recommendations. Staff respectfully recommends the board authorize the executive director to enter in a memorandum of understanding with each SASFA member agency, subject to STA legal counsel review, and approve the release of a request for proposals and subsequent selection of a public education and outreach firm to support the proposed SASFA tax measure, subject to the execution of the memorandum of understanding with the SASFA members. And that concludes my updates.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Sabrina, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, this is just a continuation of what we've been discussing at the board for the last few months, and we believe with the polling, we would like to move forward in doing an MOU with the member agencies, as well as releasing an RFP to start the education and outreach with the intent of being on the June 2022 ballot.
At any account, I think it's a very tight timeline, though.
That is correct, yes.
Looking at the attachment here. So, okay, let me turn to authority board members. Questions, comments?
We have one hand raised from Member Harris.
Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, we have talked about SABSA a lot. It's absolutely imperative that we move forward with this. So I'm going to go ahead and move the staff recommendations.
Okay.
I'll second, Desmond.
All right, it's moved by Harris, seconded by Desmond. And any other authority board member comments before I go to public comments?
Member Harris, were you making another? Oh, he put it down. Okay. There are no more additional hand raises from the members, and there is no public comment at this time for item number 8.
All right. Seeing that we have no public comment, then the motion is to authorize moving forward as outlined in the staff report. And if there's nothing further by authority board members, please call the roll.
Desmond?
Aye.
Frost? Guerra?
Aye.
Harris?
Aye.
Kozlowski?
Aye.
Kennedy? Miller? Natoli?
Aye.
Sandu? Chenier? Cerna?
Aye.
Singh Allen?
Aye.
Spees?
Aye.
Terry? Valenzuela?
Yes.
And Vang.
Yes.
And your motion carries.
Okay, and you'll carry an update each month on this one. I believe it's important just to, again, there's some tasks here that are going to require coordination with our member entities and some other work. So, okay, thank you. Very good. All right, takes us down to item 9, which is implementation of Assembly Bill number 361. Sabrina, and I don't know if council has something on this as well, but go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Since March of 2020, the governor has issued a series of executive orders waiving the physical presence requirements under the Brown Act as a means of limiting the spread of COVID-19. On September 16th, Governor Newsom signed into law AB 361, extending the authority of public agencies to conduct meetings by teleconference, including video conference, during the COVID-19 pandemic. On September 28th, Sacramento County Public Health Officer Olivia Casiri issued a memorandum recommending teleconferencing for public meetings as a form of COVID-19 prevention. AB 361 gives the option to continue to meet virtually, but requires the STA governing board to reconsider that need for virtual meetings every 30 days. The board must find each time that it has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and that the state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of the members to meet safely in person. Due to the continued state of emergency declared by the governor and by the recommendation of the Sacramento County Public Health Officer, I am asking the board to adopt AB 361 provisions for the next 30 days.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments by authority board members?
I'll move the item. This is Vice Chair Valenzuela.
Okay. Moved by
Second, this is Cerna.
Moved by Valenzuela, seconded by Cerna, then to approve the staff recommendation, and we'll have to take this up every meeting.
Yes, that is correct.
Right, okay, so, okay, we have a motion and a second, and any members of the public?
There are no public comment at this time for item number 9, and there are no hand raises by any members in the Zoom.
All righty, with that then, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Desmond,
Aye.
Guerra,
Aye.
Harris,
Aye.
Kozlowski,
Aye.
Miller, Natoli,
Aye.
Sandu, Cerna,
Aye.
Singh Allen,
Aye.
Spees,
Aye.
Valenzuela,
Yes.
and Vang.
Yes.
And your motion carries.
Okay, that takes care of our action items, and then I come down to item number 10, which is comments, thoughts of authority members. Anyone wish to add anything for the good of the order?
I do not see any hand raises at this time from the members, and there is currently no public comment for item number 10.
Okay. With that being said, then we'll draw this meeting to a close. Our next meeting is November 18th,
That is correct.
same time, same place, and with the call-in ability, as we just noted. And we don't have I did need to ask, we don't have a December meeting set yet, right? We don't. Are we?
We do have a December meeting set. Historically, we have not held it. We've,
That's what I mean. So we don't have one set. If you don't hold
no,
it.
it's on the calendar.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It didn't
for-
show on that.
I believe it's December 11th.
Okay, is that noted? Because it didn't show on that calendar. You
Oh.
just with the calendar you just showed with the SAFSA tax measure didn't have a December meeting. It says to be determined.
That might have been an oversight.
Okay, so we do have just by way of note then, we do have a December meeting. December 11th is the current date that's been.
So, what that meant was for the countywide meeting.
Okay.
I don't know what
Okay.
it'll be for the
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, all right.
In clarification, it's December 9th,
Oh, December 9th,
Yeah.
okay. It just
unless
changed.
you want to meet on a Saturday.
No, I don't think you have a consensus around that. Okay, so next meeting, November 18th. And again, thank you all for being with us and for your good comments. And we'll see everybody back November 18th. We're adjourned.
Thank you.